The anime starts off by showing that at the Magic Academy called Hardin, magical talent is everything. But there are always those people who just weren't born with that kind of gift. And right away, we see a swordsman going all out against some monsters in a dungeon. Then we find out that the guy's name is Will, who's the main character of our story. And to top it off, he's actually one of those people who doesn't know a thing about magic. Cut to the academy where Will is studying. The teacher calls him up to activate a spell on a stone. But since Will doesn't have any magic, everyone starts making fun of him. Edward tries to calm things down and says that Will is good with theory, but that doesn't help at all when it comes to magic. Then, this guy named Sion, who's super full of himself, casts a fire spell that explodes on the magic stone. Edward shuts Sion down and casts another spell, turning the stone into some kind of crystal. He takes the opportunity to lay it out. Magic rules everything. And in this world we're in, the teacher even humbly says that people like Will shouldn't even be at such a top academy because they'll never be better than the others. Later, after classes are over, Will gets hassled by Sion and a few other guys on his way out, telling him he should stop going to the dungeon just to earn a few measly points. That's when Colette shows up and starts defending Will because she thinks he's way nicer than the rest of the crowd. Sion, just to top it off in the worst way, says the title of mage is too much for him and takes off. Then the two of them start talking and Cole says he shouldn't pay attention to what they say, not to mention that the teacher went too far trying to humiliate him in class. Will, ever the charmer, thanks her and says he loves it when a beautiful girl like her stands up for him. The girl gets all flustered and asks if he says that to everyone, but Will swears he doesn't, that his parents always taught him to compliment ladies, and that he really does think she's very pretty. The girl almost has a meltdown but tries to keep her composure since she comes from a noble family. Suddenly, Will and Cole start staring at a protection spell that's up in the sky. Will starts explaining that a long time ago, some sinister villains had spread darkness throughout the kingdom, but then 5 wizards showed up, cast a protection spell, and wiped out the darkness, freeing everyone. He also says that these wizards were known as the Vandermages, which is basically the highest title for the most powerful mages in the kingdom. The girl asks if a mage named Alvis is watching them from the magic tower, and Will, ever the optimist, says yes. Then we meet Alvis, who's up in the tower, and there's a flashback to when Will was a kid. Will and Alvis had been best friends since they were kids and promised each other they'd become the most powerful mages so they could become Vanders. But that promise never really happened because the girl was insanely talented and became the youngest Vandermage in history. Unlike the main character, who's just an ordinary student with no magic at all, but still dreams of becoming a Vandermage. Back in the present, the magic teacher, Wagner, scolds Will, telling him to stop going into dungeons alone. Will gets really embarrassed and starts apologizing. Wagner says that, even so, he managed to defeat a monster, and that'll earn him 2 credits. Then Will and his little cat, Kiki, get super happy. Wagner also says that if he really wants to become a Vander, it's gonna be very complicated, because first he needs to get into the Advanced Institute and earn a bunch of credits. Not to mention he needs both theoretical and practical knowledge in magic. And since he doesn't have any magic, it's gonna be 10 times harder. Will tries to say that he'll do his best, but Wagner cuts him off, saying that without magic, it's almost impossible, and even adds that he doesn't even know if Will will graduate since he hasn't earned any credits in the exams. To make things worse, he warns that by the end of the week, Will needs to have at least 4 credits, or else he'll be expelled from the academy. The protagonist starts to panic, realizing he only has 2 days to do this, and begins reviewing the books to see which monster he can defeat to earn the credits. At that moment, the professor mentions that he thinks there's a monster called Baskerville on the 6th floor of the dungeon. Will gets super excited and thanks him for the information. But Sion was eavesdropping on the conversation and runs off to the place because he thinks that if he defeats the monster, Will won't get the points and he'll be able to get Will expelled from the academy. A long time later, Will heads to the dungeon all happy, thinking about facing Baskerville and earning the 4 credits. Kiki goes along, and Will tells him to watch out for the monster's fire breath. He also asks Kiki to help because it seems like the cat has a good nose for tracking monsters. Meanwhile, Cien and his crew are already in the dungeon. The guy's friends ask if he's sure about what he's doing. Cien, all full of himself, doesn't even answer, but thinks that someone like Will, who doesn't have magic, shouldn't even consider becoming a Vander. Suddenly, one of Sion's friends gets hit by the monster. Will hears the other friend's screams and rushes over there. When he gets there, Will sees that Sion is fighting an evil sentinel and is shocked to find out the monster is worth 10 credits. He thinks that this creature should be a few floors lower. Sion's magic doesn't even faze the beast. Sion starts to panic because he doesn't want to become just another statistic. But Will wonders if it's even worth saving the guy, since he's always giving him a hard time for not having magic. Then Will remembers his friend who said he was a kind person and always willing to help others. That's when she gave him the glasses he uses in battles. In the end, Will decides to put on the glasses and go on the attack against the monster, right when Sion was about to get roasted. The protagonist blocks the attack and thinks he's about to become a lone swordsman. Cut to another scene. Edward rushes in, desperate to tell Wagner that Sion and his students went into the dungeon. When he hears they're on the 6th floor, Wagner stays totally calm and tells him not to worry, because Will is there. Back in the action, Will is going all out with his attacks, and unlike Sion, is actually giving the monster a hard time. The two teachers are watching the fight through a magic orb, and Edward is impressed by Will's power. Wagner explains that Will's case is different from the others because even without magic, he has superhuman strength, not to mention the combat skills that make him a war machine. Suddenly, Will manages to cut off the monster's arm, the one holding the giant sword. Next, Will grabs the monster's sword, and the creature tries to attack with a powerful lightning strike, but Will blocks it and counterattacks with a slash that causes a massive explosion, taking the beast out for good. In other words, in a world full of magic, the protagonist is the toughest swordsman and warrior of them all. Right after, Will goes to help Sion, but the guy is super pissed off. Edward, of course, didn't like at all finding out that someone without magic could be better than him. The next day, even after getting chewed out by Wagner, the protagonist was praised because the monster gave him enough points so he wouldn't get expelled. Then there's a flashback to the day the protagonist entered the academy. People made fun of him, saying he was useless because he didn't have magic. Until one day, Wagner took him to Principal Cauldron and she gave him a dagger. Then she summoned several magical attacks and the protagonist managed to block them all. Seeing the kid's talent, she let him stay at the academy. At that moment, the protagonist asked if he'd ever be able to climb the tower to be with elves, and she said yes, but he had to keep his determination and be responsible. She gave the boy some hope, right? Back in the present, Wagner explains that to become a bender, you have two options: create a new spell or earn 7,200 credits at the academy. But he warns that a lot of people there are lazy and don't even study, so they might not even graduate, which means there'll be extra classes. A few hours later, Colette and the protagonist meet up and talk about how tough the class was. Suddenly, they hear some students saying that it was Cien who defeated the evil sentinel. But even Cien doesn't understand how the protagonist was the one who took him down. At that moment, he sees the protagonist walking by and goes over to confront him, super angry. But then Colette stands up for the guy and Cien ends up leaving. Meanwhile, Edward is furious with the principal, demanding that she expel the protagonist. But she says that at this point, it's too late, since he's already in his 6th year and, aside from the magic thing, he's an excellent student. She even says that maybe he won't become a bender, but he could be a healer or something else. Since the guy wouldn't stop talking about the protagonist, Cauldron suggests they give him a test, and she tells Edward himself to create it, since he knows everything about bender magic. After all, Edward is known as the Dark Viper Mage. Back to the protagonist, he grabs his books and heads to the library to study history. And man, the guy is a genius when it comes to theory. His friend asks how he knows so much, and Will answers that if he loses even a single point, that's it. He won't get into a good college. The girl notices he's got a callus from studying so much, and she gets all worried, wanting to get rid of it for him. Then Edward shows up and tells Will to go to the spellcasting room right now. When he gets there, the protagonist thinks it's just some extra class, but the guy immediately launches an attack right next to him and says it's going to be a test because of his poor performance. He just has to land one hit to pass. And he even says that if Will passes the test, he'll earn 5 credits in spellcasting, but if he fails, he's out of the academy. Then we see that the protagonist really wants to stay at the academy. At that moment, Edward starts casting a dark magic spell on the protagonist. Switching scenes, Wagner is on his way to talk to Cauldron. She apologizes for calling him over and, without a second thought, creates a giant screen where you can see the protagonist and Edward fighting. She forbids him from interfering because he's the one who will decide the protagonist's future at the academy, and Edward was chosen for this test because he's one of the best at magic. Wagner says it's unfair and cruel that he was the one to do the test, because we find out that Edward is the mage closest to becoming a bender mage. Then we see that the protagonist can barely dodge the guy's attacks. He tries to get close to land a hit, but a magic barrier stops him. To make things worse, the protagonist takes a hit and thinks the teacher is really strong, because he doesn't even need to cast spells to attack. The protagonist gets nervous because the guy starts casting a spell called Dex Darby's Reign, which is a bunch of spells at once that are going to hit the protagonist like knives. He tries to dodge for a while, but ends up getting hit and feels powerless because he can't win. And he really wished he had his sword to fight. Switching scenes, we see Violetta super worried about the protagonist, thinking Edward must be making his life hell. And right at that moment, who shows up? Kiki, all beat up. The cat starts scratching at the protagonist's closet, and Violetta realizes she wants something in there and opens it to see what's up. Meanwhile, the protagonist is lying on the floor, and Edward throws out "being a bander is way too hard for you." He even adds that if the guy can't even beat him, imagine actually becoming a real bander. Even after being humiliated by the teacher, the protagonist doesn't give up and says he's going to become a bander. Yes, sir. He gathers what strength he has left and pushes the guy off him, and he even says that his motivation to become a bander is to be with the person he loves, which, everyone knows is Alves. This makes Edward boil with rage, calling the protagonist impure and saying he'll never be with her. That's when Violetta shows up and tosses the protagonist's sword to him, which had been stored in the locker. Will gets his confidence back, easily blocks with his sword. Then the teacher goes after the boy with everything he's got, and the protagonist compares himself to a dwarf warrior from the old days who managed to hit a mage, proving that you really can stand up to those who think they're superior. At that moment, the protagonist leaps into the air and, with a single strike, breaks through the barrier, leaving the two of them face to face. But in the end, the protagonist comes out on top because of a cut he makes on the teacher's cheek. Then Edward leaves, saying he earned 5 credits in sorcery. Meanwhile, in a parallel scene, Cauldron and Wiener are chatting about what happened because they couldn't believe what they saw in the fight. Wiener thinks the protagonist managed to break through the magic barrier and even attack the teacher from a blind spot. In other words, it's clear that the protagonist beat magic with his sword, showing that it can even overcome the magic of a wizard as strong as Edward. After that, there's a flashback to when the two friends said goodbye to each other. After giving her the glasses, the protagonist promises that he'll become a bander so he can watch the sunset from the tower, and the girl starts crying with happiness and says she'll wait for him. Back in the present, we see the protagonist delivering newspapers. He was just walking along when he tripped, but thanks to his skills, he managed to catch all the newspapers except one. Then he notices that his friend is on the front page and sees that she was the first person to invent 2 spells. But he also reads that the Higher Institute sent a mission to the protagonist's academy, and that mission came from Alvis herself. Right after that, the protagonist meets a guy named Rusty. He asks if the protagonist can create a magic item because he needs an ice core from the Frostwalkers. They need several magical catalysts, and he'll get paid if he manages to get them. We find out that Rusty really knows his stuff when it comes to making magic items, and he gives several to the protagonist before he leaves. Shortly after, the protagonist arrives at the dungeon and sees that there are a bunch of mages there. He thinks he wouldn't expect anything less from a mission coming from Alves, but then Xion shows up and takes out several guys with a single spell. He thinks the Frostwalkers are nothing to him compared to what the protagonist did the other day. Will starts running, because if he doesn't find any monsters, he'll lose the mission. The protagonist heads somewhere else and sees that a girl is in danger. He takes out the creature in a single blow. The girl thanks him right away and is surprised that he didn't use magic. She introduces herself as Iris. Switching scenes again, we go to the classroom, where Wiener is explaining that if someone creates a spell, it will probably be named after them, and they'll go down in history. Then, a student asks if Alves is amazing in that regard, and the teacher replies that there's no one in the world who has managed to create 2 original spells. That's why she's considered one of the best mages in the entire kingdom. Cole tells her friend Rose that she thinks it's amazing that she used to be friends with the protagonist when they were kids. Then Rose starts teasing her, saying she's jealous. Cole gets all flustered, but the teacher immediately tells them both to be quiet. Back to the protagonist, they're having a conversation and someone asks Iris if she doesn't hate him. The girl replies that there's no way she could hate the person who saved her. And even though he's known for not having magic, the girl says that everyone has their own gift. At that moment, the protagonist starts explaining that the world they live in is kind of fake, you know? Like, the mages put a seal in the sky to protect them from the darkness, so the sky they see is basically a magical creation. The thing is, they're hoping that one day they'll get to see the real sky. Iris interrupts his thoughts and says she had the chance to meet Alves. What happened was, Iris was in trouble in a dungeon, surrounded by monsters, and Alv showed up with ice magic and saved her. Iris gets all excited telling the story about her conversation with Alves because she's a fan of Alves, you know? And she's super grateful. That's why she's helping collect the catalysts. Suddenly, the main character notices something strange. Frostwalkers leave a trail of ice wherever they go, right? But the trail there was like twice as big as usual, so he immediately realizes there's a giant Frostwalker nearby. The main character takes off running in that direction, and Iris is left confused, wondering how he knows all this without having any magic at all. But he just replies that there are things you learn in theory, and that he's got the know-how when it comes to magical artifacts and dungeon knowledge. And wouldn't you know it, suddenly a giant frox appears right in front of him, a super powerful creature. Iris hugs the main character, thinking that creature must be worth 6 credits, it's so strong. Then the beast attacks, but the main character pulls Iris to another spot and tells her to stay put because he's gonna take down the monster. But Iris warns him that physical attacks don't work on the big guy. The main character, totally confident, tells her to relax, that he's already taken out plenty of these before. The monster charges up a sinister-looking beam, but the main character is way faster and starts running circles around it. Then he starts attacking with one of the gadgets Rusty had given him. After running circles around the monster a bunch of times, he manages to neutralize its attack and sets the rope on fire, which burns all the way through, taking the monster out instantly. The main character is super happy because his friend's gadget worked perfectly. Meanwhile, Iris has a different look on her face, thinking that the rumors were true. She's thinking about how to give a uniform to someone else. Then the main character says he already has enough catalyst stones and that they can head back. A few hours later, we go to the tower where the Vanders are. We find out that Iris is part of this group and thinks that even without magic, the main character is incredibly skilled, a natural-born warrior. She walks into a room where all the Vander mages are gathered. First, we meet Carriot, and also Leonor, Tsue, and Alves. Iris apologizes for interrupting, but Carriot says they were just bored in a meeting anyway. The group comments that the beings from the sky are watching them, and if they're attacked, things could get really ugly. Leonor says they need more broths, I'm not sure what that is, for when the great day of destiny arrives, because they can't just let a prophecy run wild. Tsue asks Iris if she found anyone promising in the dungeon. She says that the guy who doesn't use magic was the best one she saw, but the group doesn't really agree with her. Leonor would never let inferior people get close to her. Tsue, on the other hand, thinks it could be fun and that the girls are close-minded. He even jokes, saying he'd accept a dwarf if he was useful. That creates some tension, but Carriot calms everyone down and says that the Magic Festival is coming up soon and then they'll decide what to do. After the meeting, almost everyone leaves, and Iris stays behind talking with Alves. Iris says the boy seems interesting, and Alves just creates a crystal, saying she's still waiting for the protagonist to come to her. A few days later, we see Colette and other students taking a practical exam, but the protagonist gets distracted by a guy's conversation and ends up getting hit. Then everyone makes fun of him for being a failure at magic. After that, another mage, Lyanna, does a combo with another guy named Weinel. Plus, another guy named Julius shows up who has ice magic, because these are the students who have more than 10,000 credits. After the exam, Julius shows up with Wine and Lyanna to declare war on them, because he wants to beat them. Just so you know, these are the students who have more than 10,000 credits, like points. When the exam ends, Julius goes up to Weinel and Lyanna to say he declared war because he wants to beat them in the next match. All of this is because they're getting ready for the Magic Festival, and so they can go to the Advanced Institute. Julius tries to cast a spell disguised as a flower, but the two of them blow it up right away. Everyone thinks the three of them are just too badass, the only ones there who have more than 10,000 credits. The main character explains that each person's credits are kind of like their resume for the Advanced Institute. But he doesn't even have enough to graduate, let alone go to the Institute. Will only has 5,404 credits, and he needs 7,200 to graduate and go to the Institute, you know? Then Julius shows up in front of the main character and treats him like trash. That's when the main character remembers that the Magic Festival's coming up. A little later, at lunchtime, Violet tells the main character that he should focus on other things. Usually, every student tries to show off with their spell to get recruited by the Institute. Then the main character starts explaining that the Magic Festival happens every 2 years at Highgarden Academy. There are a bunch of competitions at the festival, and the big shots from the Magic Tower always show up to recruit students. Then, while talking about Vandermagic, Mina interrupts the main character and reminds him that the tower has 4 factions: the Wand of the Lord of Thunder, the Wand of the Sacred Elf, the Wand of the Flame Emperor, and the Wand of the Ice Maiden. She says that if one of these factions picks him, like at the festival, he's already guaranteed a spot in the tower. Mina also says that there will be some guys called Watchers, like Iris, who will be looking for talented people while disguised as regular folks. She also tells the main character that if he takes part in the tournament, people will change their opinion of him, but he says he's just going to help organize the event. In the end, the main character says he doesn't want to participate because a few years ago he tried and totally messed up, ended up super embarrassed. Then the two of them see through the window that the students are already practicing their spells. Mina thinks the festival would be a good way for the main character to promote himself. Next, they head to the lockers. After helping the main character, Mina notices something, and Kiki undoes some spells that were on a locker door. Guess what? They find a secret staircase right there in the middle. When they get there, they run into a bunch of students making illegal bets. At that moment, Scion shows up, and Violet threatens him to stop bothering the main character. Scion's friends start saying that he's worried about the top 3 students. That annoys him, but everyone hears it. In the end, Scion says he's just a little worried, but he knows that in practice, his level is the same as Weinel's and Leonis. Later, the main character finishes his classes and Kahlo invites him to go to the dungeon with her, but he has to work and says he can't. The girl gets really sad because she wanted to spend some time alone with him. At night, the main character heads to the outskirts of the city where the miners are. That's because his other job is being a waiter at a tavern. An old buddy of his says that life hasn't been easy for him since he knows he works as a newspaper delivery guy, a waiter at the tavern, and still studies. The main character replies that he has to hustle because he doesn't have a scholarship at the academy and needs to pay for his studies. The guy, let's call him Donin, says he should take part in the Magic Festival, but the main character gets nervous and says he's not going. And since the main character won't stop talking, the owner, who's pretty exploitative, tells him to work more and talk less. We see that Roast also works there, and the dwarves at the bar seem to really like the main character because he always treats them super well. After a few hours, Roast suggests that his co-worker ask Winner about a job because he doesn't make much money there. Then the main character says he's already gotten used to dealing with them and that he gets along really well with Donan and the rest of the crew. He's being honest, knowing that the dwarves are honest people who love a birita and have always welcomed him with open arms, regardless of what he does or says. That's why he considers them amazing people and wants to continue the camaraderie. He even says he has the utmost respect for all of them. Right at that moment, a spoon falls to the floor, and who appears? Julius. The guy arrives with a super arrogant attitude, thinking the place is the epitome of low-class behavior. Seeing the protagonist working at the tavern, he starts mocking him, calling him incompetent. Donnan, seeing this scene, immediately starts glaring at the guy, but Julius tells him to stop staring like that because he considers dwarves an inferior race that came from another world. To make things worse, the guy sits there because there weren't any other open seats at that moment. The protagonist explains that, back in the day, the celestial beings destroyed the world the dwarves came from, and that's how they ended up in this world. But if a dwarf so much as touches a mage, their whole race pays the price. That's why there's all this heavy discrimination, and the guys won't stop making fun of everything. Even the food roast brings them. The protagonist is already fed up with hearing so much nonsense. He tells them to take back what they said about the food, because it was the dwarves themselves who planted and grew everything. Things get a little tense, but Julius says that everyone there has each other's backs. And to top it off, he does something that really pisses off the protagonist. He throws food on his shirt. Julius's friends try to step in, but in the blink of an eye, the protagonist knocks both of them out. Will comments that this hatred the mages have for the dwarves shouldn't even exist, because some mages are worse than animals. With a cynical smile, Julius thinks to himself that it had been a long time since he'd been humiliated like that. He warns that the protagonist just got himself into a huge mess for messing with someone like him. Then the guy pulls out his wand and starts freezing everything. Julius launches an attack at the protagonist, but he dodges it easily. But the guy keeps attacking and manages to trap the protagonist in some kind of ice crystal. He even creates an ice rose on the protagonist's chest to try to finish him off, but seeing the look of hatred in the guy's eyes, he reconsiders. So he challenges the protagonist to take part in the magic festival to humiliate him in public, and the protagonist, breaking out of the crystals, accepts the challenge. Then Julius says he's going to destroy what little reputation the protagonist has managed to build at the academy, but the protagonist counters, if he wins, Julius will have to apologize to Donnan and the dwarves. Some time passes and we see the protagonist in the waiting room. It's the opening day of the magic festival. There are even recruiters keeping an eye on each participant to analyze them. Next up, the first game begins and it's an aerial one. Who wins? Leanna, of course. It's her second consecutive win in several years. The girl is a prodigy, no doubt about it. Meanwhile, Iris is over there talking to Cauldron, switching to her innocent girl persona, saying she needs to support someone. In another scene, Scion is with his friends, remembering that Colette invited him to join her group. The guy got all giddy thinking she was starting to like him, but when he gets there, he runs right into the protagonist. Colette explains that she invited him to the group because to participate in one of the games, they need to have at least 21,000 credits combined. And since the three of them together reach that amount, Scion feels used. He even refuses to help, but then Julius joins their team. Julius keeps staring at the protagonist and realizes that Colette actually has her eyes on the protagonist, not him. Colette immediately realizes that there was some drama between the protagonist and Julius because the category they're going to compete in is the same as his. And after a few hours, the event commentator announces that the judge will be Edgar. After a few words, he announces that the next event will be the main one, called Attack of the Crows, which is where the protagonist, Julius, and other teams will participate. At that moment, several elf girls cast a spell that transforms the whole place. Right then, the commentator tells it like it is. There are several playing fields that the elves created around the stadium, and anything goes inside during the competition. To make things clearer, the players start at different points and have to reach the central stadium. Whoever grabs the crown that's in the middle wins. And to make things even more exciting, the teachers set up some traps around, and the teams can attack each other as much as they want. In short, it's a crazy battle royale between the teams. The guy starts talking about the favorite teams, and Science's team isn't even close to being one of them, especially with Will, who doesn't have any talent at all. The crowd doesn't let up and starts making fun of Will, telling him to give up and calling him a total loser. The team gets ready, and Ogner gets all worked up seeing Will join in. He begs him not to go, but Will is determined to win. With that, he says, let's go, and leaves the teacher super worried, since he'd already warned him not to get involved in these games. And the tournament begins. Some robotic boxes come to life and turn into a bunch of golems. Will takes off at full speed, and everyone thinks he's running straight into the jaws of death. But suddenly, Colette uses an ability on Will, and they pull off a wicked combo, blowing up the golem in a single hit and leaving everyone stunned. Colette explains that even without magic, Will knows all the magical tricks thanks to the gloves he has. After that attack, he becomes the first to get past the golems. Meanwhile, Scion remembers everything that happened with Will and thinks he would have rather been roasted by the Sentinel than saved by Will. He trained like crazy to get strong, but Will just blew right past him, and now he feels totally humiliated. Back in the present, Will's group is leading the race and enters a desert area. Suddenly, they get attacked, but Colette casts a spell that makes it rain swords. Will takes advantage of it and throws each sword at the cubes that are shooting at them, destroying everything instantly. No one can believe that the guy without magic is in first place. Even the watchers are left speechless, seeing how he spots every trap and either disables or blows them up right away. Edward explains that all this skill is because he's a dungeon rat, since if you remember, he used to live in the dungeons to make a little cash. Sirius is cheering for him from the stands. Meanwhile, the other teams are struggling with the traps, but Will is just showing off and cruising through the map with no problem. In a parallel scene, Julius is super worried because he hears the crowd in the stadium cheering way too loudly. He asks his teammates to check things out with their search abilities, and they tell him that Will is leading the race. He relaxes a bit and says he'll take care of it. Back to Will, they're attacked by some nasty traps that Edward set up, but Will manages to defend himself, which makes Edward furious because he didn't expect Will to get through so easily. Suddenly, the group enters a forest, and Will barely dodges a lightning bolt that Julius throws at him. Will gets really nervous because he didn't expect the guy to catch up so fast. His plan was to get there first and wait to attack, and he wonders why Julius is alone. Without thinking twice, he fires off several spells that attack Will like missiles. Will thinks the fight is about to go down right there, and suddenly there's a huge fire explosion because Scion showed up to lend a hand. Or at least that's what we thought, because Scion is furious, and Colette tells Will to run, since the guy is about to go all out and attack his own teammate. Will manages to protect himself with an earth shield that he pulled out of who knows where. After the attack, Scion says that actually, the attack was meant for Julius, to get him out of the way, but it was so strong it opened up a path of fire. Scion admits he pushed Julius aside so he could have a fight with Will, because he's bitter about being outdone by Will's talent. Will can't even believe he's hearing these words from his own teammate. Talk about awkward, since they're supposed to be a team, right? But Scion, out of nowhere, launches an attack at the protagonist, saying he's a despicable person and that he doesn't need any more reasons to take him down. Colette tries to step in to defend him, but Julius creates an ice barrier, stopping her from getting close to help the protagonist. To make things worse, he even charges up an attack that hits the girl, and the protagonist sees everything but can't do anything because he's being attacked himself and his sword gets knocked far away. Then Will says they can't be fighting like this, since they're on the same team and need to win the tournament. But Scion is blinded by rage and just wants to fight the protagonist to get revenge for the humiliation he made him go through. Then there's a flashback to the protagonist's first year at the academy. We see that the boy felt really bad, rejected by everyone, and Scion tried to make him his subordinate so he wouldn't feel so down. But the protagonist just ignored his words because he was feeling too awful. He saw that Scion only thought about going to the tower, and because he was rejected, Scion has hated him ever since that day. Back in the present, the guy keeps attacking the protagonist with all sorts of fire magic. Since the protagonist just keeps dodging the attacks, Scion gets furious and tells him to fight back too. But Will says he won't do that because they're on the same team, and also because he promised something to Donan and Vesto from the dwarves. Hearing that, Scion says that in that case, he'll finish him off and turn him to ashes. Meanwhile, the crowd watching is left speechless, seeing teammates going at each other like that. Edward even comments that they should focus on getting the crown and that this ugly fight is gonna look bad for both of them because the Watchers will see it as a negative and won't want to recruit them for the magic tower. And sure enough, the recruiters end up disappointed with Scion. The guy was in the top 4 with the most credits at the academy and threw it all away with that attitude. Meanwhile, Iris shows up with Rusty, and the two of them start chatting about the main character. Rusty never imagined that she'd be rooting for someone like him, especially since there's so many favorites among the competitors. Back to Colette, she's thinking about how to stop her teammates. But Julius is there, getting in the way of her plans. Suddenly, the girl takes a hit, but she still manages to block it. But she falls into a trap the teacher had set, and there's a huge explosion. Then, out of nowhere, everyone in the stadium is totally confused because they start seeing a bunch of Juliuses all over the place. Turns out, he came up with a secret technique to multiply himself and go after the rest of the opponents. We see him get close to Wilnod, but the guy destroys the clone with a single attack. He releases some kind of crystal, and the guy thinks Julius must be really skilled with that secret technique, since only a mage bander could pull off something like that. The commentator, seeing that Julius is out, is impressed by the power of the elves. Switching scenes, we see 2 elves named Phoebius and Lephia who are watching the fight closely. Both of them think that, despite the good performance in combat, everything is just too normal. They decide to leave because they're not really into festivals and are even thinking about writing a report for Eleanor. Meanwhile, Scion's teammates are furious with him. They can't believe they were winning, and he went and did something like that, attacking his own teammate? Even though Scion doesn't like the protagonist because he doesn't have magic, they think everything he's doing to try to get the guy kicked out is really messed up. Back to the protagonist, he's feeling kinda tired and wondering why Scion is so obsessed with him. Then there's a quick flashback of the protagonist. Many years ago, he and his friends used to mess with the protagonist, throwing his books away and other stuff like that. And Will knows better than anyone that he's a failure and doesn't need to do these things to show off, because all of this just makes him feel worse than he already does. The protagonist even thinks that if he were in Scion's position, he wouldn't be so selfish. But right after, the protagonist remembers that he can't take his eyes off the goal because he needs to win so he can go to where Alvis is. Back in the present, Scion starts casting a sinister fire spell to finish off Will. He summons a Guardian Falcon, kind of like a Fire Phoenix, which is a Guardian level spell, and sends it up. The protagonist thinks about cutting off its wings to attack the guy, but the Falcon regenerates and comes at him again. Then Will realizes he needs to destroy the creature's core. He also realizes that these Guardians are used to buy time and cast other spells. After defending against the attack, everyone is left speechless by the summoning. Even Edward thinks the spell is way too advanced for a student. The recruiters start talking and think he's reaching Liana's level, and the top 3. They even agree that the festival is great for seeing everyone's potential. One of them decides to write a report to Cario, saying there are some good students this year. Back to the main character, he says they need to stop fighting and mentions that Scion has gotten a lot stronger. Scion replies that they have to fight because he spent his life being humiliated by Will and doesn't understand how the guy doesn't hate him. But Will says that he does despise him, and that he even thought about cutting him off, but now he's focused on beating Julius and doesn't have time for that. Scion gets furious and says that just looking at his face already pisses him off. That's because the main character never gave up, even after everything that happened. And to everyone's surprise, Scion admits that Will always ignored him, unlike everyone else, and that all he really wants is the guy's attention. Then the main character realizes that he just wants to be taken seriously. So he says that if Scion wants his presence that badly, then they need to fight with everything they've got. Scion realizes he finally got Will's attention and summons the Fire Falcon again. The main character knows the Guardian won't let him get close that easily, but suddenly, Scion throws the Falcon and combines it with several divine level spells. And Will gets tense seeing that super powerful double attack coming his way. But the main character already knows how to win. He dodges the Guardian, destroys the core, and charges straight at Scion. But out of nowhere, Violet shows up and creates an earth barrier, making the main character run right into it. She tells him to stop, saying he hasn't beaten Julius yet, but the guy has disappeared. Scion gets super worried about Violet's clothes and says that a noble like her shouldn't be dressed like that. But she says it's his fault for starting a fight with the main character. Violet tells Will to go on and settle things with Julius. Scion tries to say something, but Violet cuts him off and tells him to stop interfering. And being the obedient guy he is, he has no choice but to listen. The main character thanks her, and she blushes. So deep down, she liked it. She even says that he can fight Scion another time. At that moment, the main character flies off, and we see Julius entering the stadium. Everyone thinks his team has already won, but suddenly the main character falls from the sky, making a huge crash. Will says it's time to fight, and Julius is happy because he's gonna get to humiliate him in front of everyone. In a parallel scene, Albe is relaxing by the window in the tower, but then an assistant from the Ice faction, Maris, shows up and gives her a smack on the head to wake her up. Maris says that all she does is sleep and look down at the world from above. Then the girl hands her a paper with the top candidates for the Ice faction, and Julius is in first place. Maris tells Alba to consider making him her successor as Bender. Back to the protagonist, the mood is tense, and Julius thanks him for coming since he was bored and wants to beat him up and humiliate him once and for all. But the protagonist replies that he won't lose until Julius apologizes to Donnan and the rest of the dwarves. So Julius, without thinking twice, creates a smokescreen with his ability to attack the protagonist without any trouble. But the protagonist is able to sense Julius's presence when he attacks, but just as he finds the guy, he gets hit. The protagonist is stunned to see that right in front of him, Julius starts summoning a bunch of clones of himself. The clones charge forward and immediately start freezing the protagonist's body. Edward got nervous right away because he knows that this cloning spell isn't that easy to pull off. Meanwhile, Warner thinks this ability is called Glossfraw and that it comes from the secret magical arts created by Alves, and it's not nearly as easy to replicate as the guy is making it look. To make things worse, this ability is one of the 2 spells we mentioned earlier. The protagonist asks how he can use Alves magic, and the guy thinks he just studied and has pure talent. He even mocks the girl, saying that one day he'll surpass her and make her look ridiculous in front of everyone. Then the protagonist gets annoyed and, after breaking the crystal, charges at the guy. But the clones start attacking right away, and he has no choice but to block their attacks. Julius says that the clones can move as if they think, just like him. Suddenly, they stop attacking the protagonist, and we see that after turning into lightning, they trap him in some kind of cage. He tries to break the cage, but it doesn't do any good. And to finish things off, Julius summons a giant crystal that hits the protagonist dead on. Everyone is shocked by the guy's insane power. Edward thinks he won without even moving from his spot. Julius, all full of himself, starts talking to the recruiters, thinking that with Alva's magic, he proved he's way superior and could be the girl's successor. Everyone starts applauding him, and Iris thinks he managed to fool the protagonist, even though he's skilled. So she thinks he's a real strategist. But suddenly, Julius is stunned when he sees the protagonist break free from the crystal with a single slash. He can't believe the guy tanked such a powerful attack. The protagonist thanks him, saying he was able to keep a cool head because Julius insulted Alves. Then he decides to attack again, but the protagonist, using his insane speed, takes out Julius's teammates with a single blow. Edward realized that he used the same strategy of hiding and finishing off his opponents like he did with him. And we see that Julius's clones disappeared because the protagonist was using them as support for his own teammates. In the end, he mocks Julius, saying that he can only use a crumb of the real power that Alves has. Those words make the guy really pissed off. Meanwhile, Alves tells Maris that Julius could be a good successor, but the person she wants by her side is the best swordsman there is, which is clearly the protagonist. Back to the protagonist, he says that even though he can use the cloning ability, it's not perfect because he has to use magic the whole time. He was only using his companions because, honestly, he hasn't even perfected the technique yet. This makes Julius even more irritated, and he summons an ability and brings out several clones again. He also summons some spells from the sky, which the protagonist dodges easily while avoiding the attacks from the clones. Julius thinks the protagonist has a bit of a point, because for now he can only create 4 clones and he'll never know which one is the real one, since they all look exactly the same. And he figures that for now, he'll have to stay on the defensive. But suddenly, the protagonist finds the real one, and when he charges at him, Julius can barely manage to create an ice shield. Even so, the protagonist manages to break the shield and hurts him badly. Julius asks how he knew it was him, and the protagonist answers that it's because of the clone's temperature. Since he hasn't mastered the technique, they give off a bit of smoke, like they're letting out cold air. Julius gets really upset and asks how someone without talent like him could know this spell better. The protagonist tells him and Alves that they were childhood friends, like they grew up in the same orphanage, so he knows the girl's magic better than anyone. Everyone is left speechless, and the protagonist admits that he knows all the strengths and weaknesses of his friend's magic. Those words drive the guy crazy since he thinks a bender spell could never be beaten by someone without talent like Will. Then, the protagonist takes the guy's spell, but he blocks it easily. That's when Julius falls to his knees knowing he lost. The protagonist praised him, saying that even though he wasn't superior, he was the first mage to manage to copy his friend's magic. He even mentions that she created this clone ability when she was just 2 years old. Everyone was shocked, and the protagonist even says that because of this, the magic isn't perfect and has its weaknesses. Those words really hit the guy's ego because in the end, the protagonist basically said he was at the level of a 2-year-old child. That makes the guy laugh, and suddenly he charges up all his magical power, creating twice as many clones as he had summoned before. Now he's determined to humiliate the protagonist with everything he's got. But then Will says that's nothing to him because his friend used to annoy him by making up to 10 copies of herself. That made the guy even angrier, and he started attacking the protagonist with everything he had. But Will started moving from side to side, taking out all the guy's clones one by one. After a few seconds of wiping out the clones, he finally managed to take them all down and land a punch on the real one, smashing him into the wall and knocking him out. Everyone in the stadium was left speechless, watching the protagonist take out one of the top 3 students without using any magic at all. That's when Violet came running over, super happy about what had just happened. Even Leanna was impressed by the protagonist's talent and power. But then came the surprise. Even though he had beaten the guy, the protagonist ended up losing. Right then, Will showed up and, without saying a word, grabbed the crown like nothing had happened, making his team win. You could say Will was the smartest of them all, waiting for everyone else to fight it out so he could grab the crown. Meanwhile, Cerisa tells Alves that the crawl attack is over, but Alves seems nervous after hearing everything the protagonist said about her when they were kids. She's dying of embarrassment and has no idea what to do to turn back time. Back to the protagonist. He's a bit upset about losing, but then Violet comes over to comfort him. Even so, the protagonist feels like he managed to keep the promise he made to Donan. Later that night, everyone is at the tavern celebrating the protagonist's fight. Steiner even thanked the dwarves for taking such good care of Will. And after a few hours, Donan asks the protagonist if he got recruited for the tower. But Violet says no, because he didn't win. And she's still mad because it was all Cyan's fault. She even says they invited him to celebrate, but he turned it down. Donan also thinks he managed to beat Julius, and he ended up apologizing, but they made him work washing dishes, because that's how dwarves accept apologies. Julius was desperate since he'd never worked before. Ku asks the professor if it was a good idea to throw this party after the fight. He replies that they've already done the hardest part, which was showing their talent in combat, so now they just have to wait until tomorrow. Koryo asks if they're gonna treat the protagonist better now because of the power he showed. The professor confirms and hopes he'll have a much better life than he used to, since he was always looked down on by everyone. The next day, the protagonist goes back to the academy and everyone is getting ready for dungeon training. People started inviting the protagonist to join their groups since everyone saw how badass he is. A bunch of guys came over and started arguing about who would get Will on their team. Violet got annoyed seeing that they were all pestering Will to have him in their group, so she stepped in and reminded them how they used to treat him before. The protagonist was super happy to see that now he was liked and had friends. But then one of the girls grabbed the protagonist's hand and told Violet not to be so selfish. Violet was furious seeing someone touching the protagonist, so she pulled him away from the girl and said they already had a date. Later that night, Violet thought she had gotten carried away and now didn't know what to do about the date she had with the protagonist. Then Rose showed up and started teasing her. Rose said she needed to get ready so she wouldn't disappoint the protagonist, and even said that if she dressed up, the rumors might actually come true. Meanwhile, Rost was talking to the protagonist and asked if he was going to the dungeon tomorrow. The protagonist plays dumb and says that actually he has to go out with Violet to buy some stuff he needs. The next day, Violet gets all dressed up, thinking that even if it's not a date for the protagonist, she's gonna make it one. Right then, Will shows up and says she looks beautiful, totally different from how she usually is. He even says, "My heart started racing just seeing you." The girl gets super nervous, but then Ross shows up and ruins everything. He introduces himself to Violet and immediately says he's coming along for the shopping, ruining her plans on the spot. The protagonist says he invited him, since Ross had asked the night before, right? That's when Ross grabs the protagonist's hand and Violet is totally confused because real friends don't do that kind of thing. And the rest of the day was Violet trying to get closer, but Ross wouldn't let the protagonist breathe, like he was seriously crushing on him. Violet was thrown off because she wanted some alone time with the protagonist. After a long while, Violet asks the protagonist who Ross is, since he didn't leave his side for a second, and asks if he's some girl or something like that. The protagonist says he's a guy, and she knows that because they're so close they've even taken baths together, and his sword is bigger than Ross. And to make things even weirder, Win comments that Ross has always been like that. Then he brings some drinks, but only two, because one is for Violet and the other they're gonna share. At that point, they tell the protagonist to go sharpen his sword with the dwarves, because wizards aren't welcome there. He agrees and heads to the forge. Violet takes the opportunity and asks Ross directly if he has stronger feelings for the protagonist. Ross stands up and, in a kind of threatening tone, says that no one loves Will more than he does. And then they start arguing about who is the protagonist's best friend. To top it off, Ross says, "At least I've taken a bath with him." Meanwhile, the protagonist thinks the two of them are acting really, really weird. At that moment, Liana shows up and asks to have a word with them. She asks him to go with her, and they arrive at a house where the rest of the top people from the academy are hanging out. Once they're there, Liana explains that at the end of the semester, there are some group activities, and she wants the 5 of them to form a team to complete the dungeon. The protagonist immediately gets nervous because he knows that Scion and Julius hate him, and the two of them already start complaining to Liana for bringing him along. Scion gets annoyed because the protagonist ignores him, but Ignal uses an illusion spell to calm everyone down and asks them to at least listen to the proposal. Liana explains that with his talent, he could be useful in the dungeon, but the other two refuse to work with the protagonist no matter what. Then the protagonist gets down, seeing that he's being rejected again, unlike Ignal, who seems to be a nicer and more understanding guy. He even thinks the two of them are losers who haven't gotten over their defeat. And he even says, "You shouldn't underestimate someone who beat you so easily, proving that my sword is better than your wands." To top it off, he says that even though the protagonist has fewer credits than Liana, he respects her decision to add him to the group. Unlike the dummies, Liana plays it straight and admits she wants to use them to get famous and climb the tower, since she didn't get a good spot in the festival for some reason. And she goes on to say that they don't care about the academy and that she sees them as inferior. That's why, coming from an important family, she always has to achieve great things and wants to become a magic bender. She knows that everyone there has the same ambition, so she asks for their support because no one else understands the drive to reach that level. After the conversation, they agree. They'll help out. Right after that, the main character goes back to his friends and tells them he's going to do the practicals with Liana's group. The next day, the teacher announces that deeper levels of the dungeon will open in 10 days. That way, you can earn up to 1,000 credits just by taking down the guardians on each floor. And Edward even warns everyone that things could get ugly, like actually dying, because in previous years, some creepy monsters swallowed up 4 students. Even with the teachers keeping an eye on the dungeons, there's no way to prevent every accident that might happen. A few days go by, and the group is ready to take on the dungeon, and Violet tags along uninvited, telling Liana that wherever the main character goes, she'll follow. In the end, the teachers announce that there will be safe camps on each floor in case anyone needs help, and with that, they officially kick off the training, which will last a week. Cut to another scene, and a guy tells Cariot that the students' training has started. The guy seems to be waiting for someone because he says the sky barrier is almost closing. Back to the protagonist, the group takes off like a rocket and jumps off a cliff, but magic saves them before they fall, and they come face to face with a creature that looks like a praying mantis, along with an army of insects. Then the protagonist thinks he should act as a shield for the mages, but Inu stops him because Liana starts fighting hand-to-hand and completely wipes out the creatures. Gwenelle comments that in the Owens house family, she's an exception for fighting like that. Mina, all confident, thinks they need to move forward as quickly as possible because the credits aren't that important. Then there's a flashback to when the professor was giving Wynne some advice. Wagner had said that the most important magic in a dungeon is search, to sniff out any enemies. And back in the present, the protagonist doesn't sense the presence of a boss, and just as Junis barely manages to defend him, Ino already gets nervous, because without magic, it's tough for him to track down enemies. They take down a bunch of monsters, and Ino thinks the protagonist is weaker than he expected, telling Liana that maybe she was wrong about him. The girl, totally chill, says maybe it's because he hasn't had a chance to act as a shield yet. But when they get to a lower level with stronger enemies, he'll show what he's made of. On the other hand, the mages can use their wands to absorb the magic that monsters release when they die, unlike the protagonist, who has to carry a piece of the monsters to prove they've been taken out. Then the protagonist realizes that everyone else is just killing the monsters and he can't do anything, and he feels kind of like a lost backpacker in the group. After a whole day in the dungeon, Liana thinks they should stop to rest, so Enel creates an illusion in a spot where there are some creepy flames to keep the monsters away. Next, the protagonist starts handing out some food rations, but Gwenelle would rather he just leave it on the ground, because for an elf like him, being touched by someone unworthy is an insult. Colette tries to stand up for the protagonist, but the guy says he only considers Leanna worthy. The protagonist tells her to chill, because he understands that elf culture is really different from that of mages. The protagonist thinks that elves are similar to dwarves because they're talented and come from a culture where they only see value in certain people. And their pride comes from Eleanor, who is the queen of the elves and one of the magic benders. At that moment, one of the girls says she'll cover up the trail they left behind and mentions that the group's goal is to take on some monsters called Luminous Navarus, which are worth 110 credits, and there's only one in the whole dungeon. They're all super determined to take it down, but she says that people who've tried before usually give up, so it's kind of like a final boss or something. Leanna admits that she put the group together to take down this monster. That way, she can show the tower what they're capable of. In the end, Mina says they're going to avoid fighting to save their magic and look for the shortest path to the 10th floor of the dungeon. The main character thinks that even though he only earned 5 credits today, he's kind of freaked out by the idea of a boss like that, but he knows he has to face it if he wants to see Alviz. In a parallel scene, 2 shady guys are staring at a professor's decapitated head. One of them says he made the guy go through hell. Back with the group, they kept going and made it to the 10th floor. But they ran right into a pile of monster corpses. They started wondering if another group had come through before them, but the main character thought there were no signs of magic or brute force used to take out the creatures. They reached the boss room and realized someone had taken out the monster just a short while ago. They decided to use search to check out the area. At that moment, the main character remembered the teacher saying there's a monster that can escape search. Back in the present, the main character looks up and suddenly, a giant monster starts charging up a super powerful lightning attack. The main character barely manages to block the attack, but Yunali gets the worst of it. Everyone starts attacking the monster right away, but it creates a huge hole in the ground. While everyone is falling, the main character decides to help Yunali. Since he's unconscious, even the people on the first level of the dungeon feel the place shake. After falling, the main character realizes he's no longer in the Academy's territory. He ended up right on the 11th floor. Julius and Sam are tense too, since from the 11th floor on, the levels belong to the tower members, who are basically the bosses, just as strong as the Vanders, who can go to such a dangerous place. Meanwhile, Liana is hurt and thinks they literally fell into hell. Colette comes up to her and thinks they need to regroup with the rest of the crew. Otherwise, things could get ugly. Next, we see Gunari dreaming about the elves treating him like trash because he thinks it's shameful to serve a bunch of half-baked mages. Right then, he wakes up and sees that the main character has taken down a giant snake. The guy gets nervous when he sees that the main character defeated the monster by himself, but since he tried to help, Gunari got pissed and told him not to touch him. Willie replied that even though he hated him, he wasn't going to leave him there and wanted to heal the wounds on his arm. But Ginali would rather heal himself. And the main character thinks that since the supplies were split among everyone, they have to find a way to meet up in less than 24 hours. Junali says they should wait for a rescue, but the main character thinks it's better to look for their friends, because with a monster like the one that attacked them on the 10th floor, it's going to take a long time for anyone to help. In a parallel scene, a girl named Elisa tells Weiner that the 8th floor was attacked. To make things worse, a creature ripped off the heads of several members, so she doesn't know if anyone survived the monster invasion on the 9th floor. Weiner thinks that if someone killed Academy professors, it's very possible that all of this was planned by someone. At that moment, Edgar shows up and says they have to cancel the training sessions because all the students are in danger. Back with the protagonist, they keep walking, and Cunali gets mad at the protagonist because he asked him to stop using search. Gianali says they need to stay alert so they don't get ambushed again, but the protagonist, totally calm, says that he and Kiki can track nearby monsters and take out the ones that search doesn't catch. Gianali says he doesn't understand how he can stay so calm in a situation like this. And Willie says it's because he had to work hard to earn credits in the dungeon, so he could keep studying. The two are interrupted when Kiki signals to the protagonist that something's coming, and suddenly they're surrounded by several demon orcs, which the protagonist immediately starts killing. Yunali thinks that the protagonist turned a lot of unknown knowledge into something familiar, thanks to Theory, and understands how he really became so strong. Suddenly, one of the orcs is about to attack Yunali, who tries to cast illusion magic, but it's useless. It doesn't work because the orcs are blind and track by smell. Seeing that the monster is about to kill the guy, the protagonist comes flying in and saves his companion with a single blow. Next, the protagonist tells Gunali not to worry about it because he respects him and knows he's talented. But Gunali, looking a bit sad, says he thinks he's useless and a real outcast. At this exact point in the anime, they don't explain what that means, but that's what he says. Right after, they show a memory of Gunali training alone. Even though he wasn't on Vander's level, he worked hard every day to be like Eleanor. Back in the present, Ginao opens up to the protagonist and tells it like it is. He's the only elf left at the academy after 6 years. Everyone else always climbed the tower, and to make things worse, a lot of people treat him like the trash of the elves. Guy now also admits that to be on the same level as the other elves, he should be able to create real illusions, like the arena in the magic tournament. But unlike them, he can only create illusions that don't actually affect anything, that are only good for distracting enemies. Even so, the protagonist thinks he's got some serious talent, but Ginao throws back in his face what the girl had said, that the academy students are like the masterpieces of the group. Meanwhile, Leanna explains the same thing to Call. The truth is, she's only popular at the academy because the tower only values people who stand out in something important, like creating new spells, just like Alvis did. Leanna says she was even classmates with Alvis, but since the girl was more talented, she moved up really fast. Back to Will, Ginao drops a bomb that leaves him stunned. Just like the protagonist, he grew up with Eleanor and was always totally into her. He thought they'd be together forever, until the day they found out she had the power to create the King's Forest. Then the important people separated the two of them because she became a Vander. Since then, he's been killing himself trying to catch up to her, but so far he just feels like crap for not being able to climb the tower. At that moment, the protagonist gets all happy and says that now he gets it. He felt like something connected the two of them, because they both went through something similar with their crushes. Winnon asks him to leave and let him be, but the protagonist, who has a huge heart, says he's going to take care of him until he gets better, because he knows Winnon is a badass mage. After a long time fighting some tough monsters, Windun gets impressed by the protagonist's skill and realizes he's only getting beaten up because the protagonist is there, protecting him. He even asks why the protagonist doesn't just leave like everyone else did to him. But the protagonist tells him straight, it's because he knows Windun is a good guy. Suddenly, Kiki warns that something's coming, and Ginao, using search, realizes he can't detect any monsters. Then the group gets closer and sees that they're creating monsters inside the dungeon. And they manage to create some wicked fire monsters called Tauros Navage. Bull says each one is worth 11 credits and that the tower considers them super dangerous. Their physical strength and insane resistance to magic make them seriously overpowered creatures. But the protagonist says the only thing that works on them is the elves' illusion magic. But Gino feels bad because he knows his magic is pretty weak. With tears in his eyes, he tells the protagonist that he knows he's useless, but the protagonist gives him some encouraging words, saying that everyone makes mistakes to learn. Then Gino realizes that even though they share the same dream, they're really different. Suddenly, the creatures attack the protagonist, who tries to take him down but can't. Ginao tries to use his illusion magic, but it doesn't work at all. At that moment, the creatures launch a coordinated attack that hits the protagonist head-on. Even so, he gives him some motivational words to try again and says he believes in him. Right then, the guy gets a huge morale boost, because even if his own people don't believe in him, the protagonist does, and that's enough for him to keep going. He won't let down the trust the protagonist is putting in him. Then Gino casts his illusion magic and attacks the monsters with some real roots. And after taking them out, the guy kneels in front of the protagonist, apologizes for having treated him badly up until now, admits that he's a badass mage, and offers him his respect. The protagonist says he always saw him training and really admires him a lot. Then Ginel puts his pride aside and the two shake hands firmly. Right after that, the protagonist uses a magic artifact to track the group, and Kiki remembers the other's scent and starts guiding them. Meanwhile, Sion and Julia start arguing until they suddenly hide. Sion remembers that demons can't be tracked by search, and right at that moment, a bunch of evil sentinels show up. Sion musters up his courage and tells Julius to make a bunch of clones to act as decoys because he's determined to take out all those guys. Then he's able to summon his fire guardian, and in a parallel scene, we see the students running away from the evil sentinels. Edgar manages to protect a student who is about to get roasted, and after saving the guy, he jumps onto a monster controlled by Wonder, and the two of them make a run for the 10th floor, which was already where the protagonist group was headed. To top it off, Wonder says that Kiki and her sphere are connected, so she realizes that actually they're on the 11th floor. Meanwhile, Leanna is feeling really bad because all of this is happening because of her ambition, but Colette gives her some encouraging words, saying it's not her fault since she wasn't even invited to the group and tagged along with them anyway. Back to the protagonist, they sense a magical presence, and when they arrive at a certain place, they run into Sion and Julius again. Everyone is happy to see each other, but at the same time they're worried because the girls are still lost out there. In a scene change, we see that someone approaches the girls, and it's the decapitated guy. To top it off, another mysterious guy shows up, and we find out his name is Marcy, and the headless guy is called Headless. Marcy comments that, apparently, the Duke he left to finish them off failed his mission since they weren't supposed to find out the two of them were there. The girls ask who they really are, and they answer that they're the classic villains who show up because they want to destroy the fake sky the wizards created, referring, of course, to the protection spell they had cast. Without thinking twice, Headless sends a slash of darkness to try to cut off their heads, but right at that moment, Will shows up and blocks the attack. The protagonist tries to attack too, but takes a direct hit, and the group covers for him so he doesn't get too hurt because Headless, even without a head, is obsessed with taking theirs. But since other people are starting to show up, Maria says they need to get out of there. Then Headless starts writing words in the air, and while being dragged away by Maria, he begins to use gates, which is a secret teleportation magic, to summon some creepy monsters. This leaves everyone in shock, because a creature worth 270 credits appears, a Grand Duke. Then they explain that the rule of the 1,000 part is how the tower calculates credits. In other words, a monster worth 1 credit is equal to a person with 1,000 credits. But that Duke there is worth 270, which is like a person with 270,000 credits. Right away, the demon attacks, but the group decides to get out of there. Windle tries to buy some time with his abilities, but the monster destroys the barrier he had created. He attacks Windle, but the protagonist manages to save him in time. After escaping the place, Will mentions that he had already read about the Grand Duke. The protagonist says that he's almost at the top of the demonic monsters, not to mention that they usually stay on the 25th floor of the dungeon. The group gets super nervous and comments that maybe it was because of the gate that Headless used. After a long time, the group can barely manage to hide, and we see that the monsters are still looking for him. They find themselves in a tight spot, trying to figure out how to get out of there, since it looks like the Duke sent a bunch of sentinels to search for them in the area. Julius even seems kinda desperate, but the main character says there's a way out. Take down the Grand Duke, because demons follow a power hierarchy, and without defeating the leaders, the chain of command should fall apart. That makes Julius think the main character is completely nuts, but Will says he has a plan to beat the monster. This annoys Julius, who says that nobody would trust him, but Ginal stands up for the main character, saying he trusts him because he's already saved him several times. Colhayton also thinks they should support the main character, which really surprises him. To top it off, Gina tells Liana that she let the main character touch her, so she expects her to trust him too. Then Liana says that she was always mistaken, because more than just the group shield, the main character is the true leader. Even so, Julius doesn't really trust the main character's plan, and Will says they need his power. On top of that, he says that if he helps, he'll teach him a secret about Alvis's power. And then we see the main character running and luring the monster. At that moment, he comes across several clones of Julius, and the monster starts attacking them. Right then, we find out what the main character had told his friend. If Julius used his clone ability, he could keep casting spells from where he left off. Even if the clone bit the dust, it's super handy for long spells, because if one clone goes down, the next one just picks up where he left off. And wouldn't you know it, the real Julius shows up right as the clones are finishing their spellcasting. But even with their combined attack, it didn't even scratch the monster. To make things worse, the main character tried to attack the creature from above, but saw that its wings were completely indestructible. Remember, he had studied about the monster in the library? So they tried to distract the monster to buy Julius more time. But Julius went in for a direct attack and still did no damage. Everyone got tense because that was the strongest attack he had. The main character realizes this monster is a real boss, 270 credits. But he remembers that the ice attack managed to slow the monster down a bit. With that, he sees an opening to use his speed and try to land a hit on the guy. But the plan went out the window because the girl did hit, but the demon had a magic shield. She went flying, but the main character managed to catch her in midair. And just as they were about to get hit, Kiki put up a protective barrier. The barrier broke and the damage hit the protagonist's glasses. Meanwhile, the teachers show up flying at the speed of light, watching everything through the Grand Duke's orb. They're super worried, like, what is a demon of this level doing here? Back to Will, they hit the ground, but Gina helped cushion the fall, and the main character is on the ground devastated, looking at the glasses Alce had given him, now destroyed. Then Eliana says she's going to stay behind to distract the demons so they can escape. Gina says she'll go too, and the two of them charge into the attack. Scion is super nervous watching the fight get harder and harder, and he thinks the two of them are going to die. He figures that if they die, it's better to run away than to die for nothing. At that moment, the main character asks Scion to punch him because he's shaking with fear after losing his glasses. Scion takes the opportunity and lands a few punches, which helps the main character regain his courage to fight. Dude, he was about to crap his pants for real. So he asks Colette to take care of Kiki because he's going to fight. He doesn't get how he suddenly stopped being scared, but Colette says he's always afraid. He just doesn't even know what that is because he uses a wand. She says that unlike him, who uses a sword and has to fight up close, he faces monsters way bigger than he is. Even though she calls him useless and all that, he's really brave. After hearing those words, the girl goes to help in the fight, and Scion keeps thinking that she's absolutely right. Meanwhile, the main character thinks he needs to rip off the creature's wings to break through its defenses. And that's when Colette shows up to lend a hand. The main character thinks that even without his glasses and scared to death, he has to win because he's way more afraid of losing and seeing his friends die. At that moment, the demon charges up some lightning and throws it at the protagonist, but he's super fast and jumps into the air. Colette casts a spell to power up his attack, and the protagonist lands a direct hit, slicing off one of the demon's wings. Then, Scion manages to summon his guardian to get close and unleash a powerful fire attack. But it doesn't do any good, and he still gets hit. Everyone is shocked, realizing there's nothing else they can do to defeat the guy. But then the protagonist spots a crystal nearby, and looking up, he sees Rusty. The protagonist has a flashback that shows he's had a special ability since he was a kid. Will realizes that his sword also works like a magic wand. So Justasa asks Theon to cast a fire spell on him, and when he grabs the sword, it starts absorbing his friend's attack. Now he has a flaming sword. He charges at the monster, dodging everything, understands what he's capable of, and unleashes the final blow. He drives the sword into the beast, slicing the demon in two. Everyone is left speechless, shocked by what they just saw. The protagonist's sword returns to normal and he wonders what the hell just happened. But there's no time to celebrate because a horde of sentinel monsters and orcs comes running toward them. Leanna thinks she doesn't have the strength left to fight these creatures. One of the demons was about to attack Julius, but suddenly several lights start shining in the area. A divine summoning appears and destroys all the demons there. At that moment, some hooded guys show up too. The teachers arrive right after and are stunned when one of the hooded figures takes off his hood. It's Aaron, leader of the Light faction and known as the King of the Vendors, because he's the oldest of them all. The protagonist is amazed to have the King of the Mani Benders and the most powerful wand of all right in front of him. Everyone starts idolizing the guy because he's like a god to everyone in the kingdom. Then the protagonist sees that someone arrives with him and introduces himself as Finn. Meanwhile, Marcy and Headless are celebrating that they managed to escape in time. They mention that they managed to get a sword they were looking for. The next day, they explain that 11 people died, all teachers who saved the students. And to be honest, there were only a few injuries. The protagonist's group is in the infirmary, wondering who Marcy and Headless were, since those guys had enough power to take out the Academy's teachers if they wanted to. Julius thinks that if Aaron hadn't shown up, everyone there would have been toast. Leanna says a few encouraging words and admits that this wasn't their mission, that she only brought everyone together to get some recognition from the tower and ended up putting everyone in danger. But even so, she helped the protagonist discover his power, and in the end, they made a really good team. She says that her family's lineage of knights is grateful to him and respects him. Out of nowhere, the girl gets hungry, and Cole gives her some apples. But she's pretty greedy and eats all the apples, saying that hand-to-hand combat makes her need a lot of food to get her energy back. Everyone ends up a little disappointed with her answer because the girl wasn't as perfect as they thought she was. Gennaro says he was also surprised when he saw her eating for the first time because she eats like a pig. The girl changes the subject and says they won thanks to the protagonist's courage and effort. But Julius, as always, says the protagonist was shaking with fear. And he won't stop talking until Cole throws an apple in his mouth to shut him up. Meanwhile, Sion asks what kind of power that was that absorbed his magic. Leanna thinks it wasn't a power or a spell. Julius gets mad and says she could have said that earlier to avoid all this drama, but Kiki jumps on him for being so annoying. Will says he doesn't even know what happened, that he just blanked out at the time. The girls think he should ask a teacher. Then the protagonist asks about Finn because they find it strange for a boy to hang out with the King of the Vendors. Leanna says she read in some books about people like Finn who come from a village and can't use magic like the protagonist, but really know their way around dungeons. They've had a pact with the Magic Tower since the time of the Mage Queen and help the tower as guides inside the dungeon. There are even rumors that without their help, no one can reach the bottom of the dungeon. The protagonist thinks that he wants to learn more about the power he used and about the boy he talked to. Later that night, Finn arrives at the cauldron and says that their expedition made it to the 49th floor of the dungeon, and he thinks Aaron is a pretty demanding leader. He hands over a sword he found that's known as the Mage Slayer. Then the guy also says that on the 40th floor, they ran into some shady folks. There was a big fight, and apparently the sword didn't originate in the dungeon. The thing is, he thinks they're doing some experiments down there. After putting away the sword, the guy gets serious and asks why the cauldron hadn't said anything, since the deal was that the mages were theirs and Finn handled the swords, like obviously referring to us as the protagonists.
Cauldron says the mean guy is hyped to make a wand so he can catch up to Toos and become a magic bender.
And Finn says it's the first time he's ever heard of a sword wanting to become a wand. Cauldron agrees that the whole situation's pretty weird, and the guy says he'll leave it in his hands, but warns that he'll be keeping an eye on things and might step in. The next day, even though he's all banged up, the main guy keeps training like crazy. Colette comes over to say something because the guy just won't sit still. His drive to reach the tower is insane. Meanwhile, the others are watching him from the window, wondering what kind of being he is, because he doesn't seem like a mage, but he's definitely not a normal person either. Suddenly, Scion yells at the main guy that he's gonna duel him and jumps out the window. But because of the pain from his injuries, he regrets it immediately, and Colette tells him not to even think about it since both of them are in pretty bad shape. But the guy, all proud, replies that if the main guy can fight and keep training, then he can too. Scion tells the main guy to keep his promise, since at the Magic Festival he had said they would fight another day. The main guy ends up agreeing, and the two of them start trading blows. But the teacher saw the fight, so the two of them take off running because they know they're about to get hit with a major suspension. For several months, everyone just went about their normal routines at the academy. Until one day, Warner mentions that it's been a long time since the incident during training. The teacher gives them some encouraging words, saying that despite what happened, they can't let it get them down. And since the school year is ending, they're about to start the first day of the academy's graduation exams. The main guy gets super motivated, thinking he's gonna pass the exam and finally meet Alvis, the girl he loves. Sometime later, the group goes back to the dungeon. And this time, working as a team, they manage to defeat the boss Naveros. Time goes by, naturally, and Will is super focused on getting a perfect score so he can climb the tower and finally reach Elfie. Soon, exam season is coming to an end, and the teachers are shocked because Will Salford is the only student with a perfect score in absolutely everything. Warner is all excited, and Professor Elisa takes the opportunity to congratulate him because after so much effort, he's finally going to achieve his dream. Meanwhile, Julius and Scion are meeting with the principal, who praises them both because defeating the Floor Guardian with such a packed schedule is no small feat. But when he gets his wand, Julius blurts out that he only got involved because he already had a guaranteed spot in the tower. He didn't even need to face Navarros. Then Sion starts teasing him, saying that if Julius hadn't been there, nobody would have even noticed because his ice would have melted in the blink of an eye. In other words, it was totally useless. Julius doesn't let it slide and points out that Sion just hid behind everyone else to throw fireballs. As usual, the two start arguing, and the headmistress comments that you can really see how much they care about Will, which just makes them even angrier. Meanwhile, Will is studying like crazy. He hasn't slept in days, but he doesn't want to slow down because he knows that even a single point could change everything. Colette tries to convince him to take it easy, but Will explains that thanks to Liana and the others, he got a perfect score in the practicals, so now he has to work twice as hard so he doesn't waste their help. The host reminds him that he also earned points in sorcery after defeating Professor Edward, but Will insists that he's still missing 1 point and needs to make sure he gets it. At that, the host plucks a white hair from his head and warns him, if he doesn't get some rest, he'll go gray in no time. Colette gets furious, but the host just says he's doing what he always does and asks if she wanted to be the one to do it. She gets all embarrassed, and the host ends up winning that argument. Meanwhile, Leanna tells Wiggin that after defeating Navarros, they can walk up to the tower with their heads held high. Wiggin replies that it wasn't even that big of a deal, since they've faced worse before. As they're walking, Wiggin notices that Leanna has changed a lot and doesn't seem so tense anymore. She agrees and says that he has changed too, since before he was always hiding behind a smile, but never let his guard down for anyone. Wiggin admits that it's Will's fault because that day the boy showed that even he can mess up badly, and since then he's earned his respect. Leanna adds that she also learned a lot from Will, and now understands that fear really can turn into courage. They wonder what Will must be doing, and Wiggin figures it out. Of course that bookworm is studying. At night, Colette goes to bring him something to eat in the library, all worried about him. When she gets there, she sees that Will is passed out from studying so much, and she takes the chance to cover him with a blanket. She checks to make sure he's really asleep, and seeing the coast is clear, decides it's a golden opportunity. When she tries to sneak a kiss, Host suddenly shows up out of nowhere to interrupt. She tries to make up an excuse, saying she was just fixing the blanket, but Host, who doesn't want anyone hitting on his friend, says he could have sworn he saw something else. Colette changes the subject and says she's just worried because Will pushes himself too hard and always ends up getting hurt. She admits she doesn't really like this whole magic thing because Will is always chasing after Elfaria like he's under a spell while she's just stuck waiting in the tower. She feels sorry for Will, and Haas ends up agreeing with her. Meanwhile, up at the top of the tower, Elfaria runs into Eleanor, who immediately starts criticizing her and says it's rare to see her out of her room. Elfaria asks if she's still bitter about losing that duel, and Eleanor fires back saying she only lost because it was limited to ice magic. If it had been another element, she would have won. Suddenly, Zell shows up telling everyone to keep it down and get out of the way because he's coming through. Elfaria asks what they're doing there, and Zell says the reason is obvious and probably the same as hers. Terminalia's come in, and they need to get ready for the ritual because the barrier is about to disappear. To wrap things up, Professor Edward prepares the materials for the final exam, and the topic will be the origins of magic. The next day, he walks into the classroom and announces right away the exam has only one question, and whoever answers it correctly gets 6 credits. He makes it clear he doesn't want to hear any questions and that it's time for them to show what they've learned in 6 years at the academy. When they get the test, everyone is shocked by the question, what is magic? Even though it's a deep topic, everyone feels confident they can answer it. In the end, that's an answer any mage or elf would eventually figure out. The thing is, anyone who's not into magic wouldn't have the slightest idea how to answer. Will's friends are super worried, wondering what's going to happen to him, while the kid just sits there, mind blank. After all, that question isn't in the books. Will has no intention of giving up. He thinks about the elf, about the promise he made, and starts writing down what he feels. To him, magic is an unattainable miracle, something as beautiful as it is cruel. It's what lies beyond human effort, and he believes that if he doesn't give up, he'll deliver something equal to or even greater than hers. He finishes by writing that, to him, magic is, and then they leave us hanging in suspense. The scene changes, and Warner goes to confront Edward, asking what his deal is with this exam. Edward, all cynical, says he only asked the basics that any tower aspirant should know, and that he was disappointed because 4 out of 10 students failed. Warner is furious because he knows Edward did it just to screw over Will. He asks Edward if he has no shame, but Edward snaps back and says they're crazy for wanting to send someone who doesn't even use magic to the tower. According to him, sending Will there would be like sending him to a graveyard for wands just to be a guinea pig. In a world of magic, a sword will never be a wand, and he warns that both Warner and the principal are out of their minds. He simply ripped away a dream that was never going to come true. And then comes the bad news. On the list of those who failed, Will's name is right there. He ends up with 7,199 credits, and access to the tower is denied because he was short by just 1 point. The kid is devastated. Time goes by, and in the middle of the garden, the host comes to talk to him to let him know he fixed his glasses. Will opens up, asking if he saw how cruel Edward was. He's frustrated because he knows he never could have answered that question the way the teacher wanted, and now his promise is at risk. The host gives him a friendly hug and says that nothing will take away the pain right now, but he'll always be around. Meanwhile, Colette joins Higgin and Lyanna to try to find Will, but no one knows where he is. Julia shows up and tells it like it is. At this time, anyone who can't make it up to the tower usually disappears from the academy. He starts complaining, saying he's wasting his time looking for a useless guy and that Will ran away like a coward. Higgin can't take it and tells him to shut up, warning him not to insult an elf's friends. Julius asks if Higgin got bewitched by what Will did in the dungeon, reminding him that here, magic is everything and there's no place for a sword. Science stares seriously at Julius, and Julius says the two of them are the same, since neither of them can stand Will. Scion admits that Will gets on his nerves and that he wanted to make the kid eat dirt, but Edward took that chance away from him, and that's what makes him mad. Warner shows up and tells everyone to have fun since it's Terminalia, and says he'll go look for Will himself. The city starts celebrating the new year, and the event commentator, Claire, a high mage, 27 years old, who makes a point of saying she's single, starts complaining that her friends ditched her, using the students as an excuse. She's talking about Warner and Edward, remembering how they were inseparable as kids, but quickly pulls herself together so she doesn't embarrass herself any further. Claire tells the story of their ancestors who lived in peace until invaders from the sky arrived. When all seemed lost, the great Mercedes and 5 powerful mages appeared, sealing the sky and driving out the invaders. That was 500 years ago. The Fire Faction group makes sure everything goes perfectly. And up in the tower, Sovereign Carriot and the others are getting ready. Claire asks all the mages to raise their wands and join forces.
Exactly at midnight, the magia vendor begin the supreme ritual of the Great Barrier. The protection is renewed and the new year kicks off with a celebration. But out of nowhere, the atmosphere changes. A strange message appears in the sky saying, "Happy New Year." Everything turns dark and portals start to open. Monsters and demons start popping up everywhere, spreading total chaos in Hardin. While chaos takes over, the ones responsible for this mess reveal their true intentions. This is the perfect moment for a hellish feast. Their plan was surgical, because now that the magia vendor have just used up all their energy to create the barrier, they're completely drained. It's that old story, the heroes saved the world, but they were left without a drop of mana to defend themselves from what came next.
Meanwhile, Will is getting nervous watching those portals, and in the capital, the Boros are wrecking everything. The guards from the Fire faction have no idea what's going on, asking what these dungeon monsters are doing on the surface. Seeing that things are getting intense, Claire tells Rad that she'll cover them and that it's time for them to go on the attack now. With a blow on her wand, she summons an army of guardians that charges at the monsters, clearing the way for Rad's squad to fry everything with fire magic. Will's even startled, not understanding how Claire managed to call so many people at once, but soon everyone realizes that's the level of someone who runs the tower. Rad orders them to find the source of the magic circles and catch the culprit, but one of the monsters is still there, completely unharmed. Rad decides to go all out with his most powerful magic and starts celebrating too soon, thinking he's solved the problem. But that overconfidence came at a high price. Claire yells at him to get out of there, but there's no time. The monster lands a fatal blow, and that's the end for Rad. Claire is in shock when she sees that the creature ignores magic and that her guardians are being slaughtered. The monster turns on her, and she barely manages to dodge. Then she notices something. It's carrying a mage-slaying sword. From above, Headmistress Caldron watches the total chaos unfold. The other mages point out that the monsters are using the same weapons Finn had. Cauldron wonders if they managed to mass-produce those weapons, because their plan was really well put together. While she tries to figure out what they want, a professor suggests that the academy should help in the fight, but she immediately refuses. She feels that this attack on the city is just a distraction and orders everyone to defend the tower with their lives. The vendor mages know they're the target, especially since they're completely drained after raising the barrier. The assistant from the Flame faction tries to convince Aaron to let the vendor mages help, or else a lot of innocent people are gonna get hurt. But Aaron tells him to shut up, threatening to do to his throat what happened to his eyes. When asked if they're just gonna stand by and watch, Aaron confirms that's exactly what they're gonna do. No one leaves that room. If the barrier falls because one of them leaves their post, the Celestial invaders will destroy everything, and there won't be a stone left standing anywhere in the world. Meanwhile, the headless guy and his partner are a bit disappointed that the big fish didn't take the bait and didn't leave the tower. Even so, they have fun watching the misery happening down below. A little girl tries desperately to save her mother, but a giant monster shows up to ruin their day. Iris steps in to protect them both, but things go south because her magic doesn't even scratch the mage-killing sword. Just as the monster gets ready to deliver the final blow, Will enters the scene. That guy Marcy, the Headless One's partner, pays close attention when he sees they've managed to chop off the beast's arm. Will remembers how he used to hate being left out just because he didn't have magic, sometimes even resenting the mages. But he never wanted things to go this far. He plows through every monster in his way to protect everyone. The host tells him to focus only on the ones who are armed, because the mages can handle the rest who are unarmed. Without wasting a second, Will charges at a monster and slices it in half. Iris is impressed, knowing that Will is the only one who can face the mage-killing swords, but he won't be able to hold out on his own for long. That's when Aaron contacts her and gives her full authority. He orders the dwarves to be mobilized and to put an end to that mess. Iris doesn't waste any time and announces that, in the name of the king, the Goodwill Code is now in effect, lifting all restrictions on the dwarves. Now everyone is working together to drive out the threat. Warner runs and finds Donnan's group asking for help, but Donnan complains that it's no time to be working on New Year's. His wife scolds him, reminding him that Will needs them. On the other side, Edward tells the students that being a student doesn't matter right now. Everyone is a mage and needs to use their wand to defend the city. People feel a bit insecure, since the powerful folks from the tower couldn't handle it, but Liana steps up and proves that students have strength too. But even using all the power in her body, she still can't take down the monsters on the first try. Those swords are every mage's worst nightmare.
Colette comes over to ask Liana not to do anything crazy, but Liana actually tells her to go crazy. Julius already wants to bail, thinking they won't hold out until the dwarves arrive, but Chang'an points out that he noticed a weakness. When the monsters dispel the spell, they get kinda slow. That's the opening they needed to go all out with their attack. The crew didn't waste any time and unleashed their magic at full power. Since the monsters were stuck trying to block the attack, the group gave the signal for Colette to step in. A bit nervous, she even apologized to the statue of Saint Viola, but there was no other way. She used her magic to lift that huge structure and crush the monsters all at once. It was a win for the group, but Julius was quick to point out the truth. Destroying the statue of an ancient vendor magic would bring a nasty curse down on them. But Liana wasn't having any of that nonsense and ordered all the earth mages to start firing their projectiles, even if it was just plain rock, because it was time to turn their studies into real action. Claire just watched from a distance, thrilled to see that some heavy hitters would be joining the tower this year. She told the fire folks to line up with the earth mages until the dwarves arrived. And even though she hates to admit she needs their help, there was no other way out this time. Meanwhile, the headless guy commented that the city was holding up under the pressure. Marcy explained that it was a screw-up for the guys who made the swords to have crossed paths with this expedition, and they even lost a weapon to Aaron's group and the dwarf, Finn. If the Institute folks analyze that sword and figure out the mage killer's weak spot, their whole plan would go down the drain. But the headless guy wasn't even fazed, saying that, all things considered, everything was going just as expected. It was time to call in the heavy reinforcements. Out of nowhere, right in front of Will, a bizarre portal started to form, and from it came a terrifying monster that, with a single blow, sent Will flying, crashing through several buildings. Somewhere else, Finn was taking out the terrorists left and right. Suspicious that they were the masterminds behind the swords, he cornered one of them to make him talk. The guy just laughed, saying the whole plan was to lure Finn deep into the dungeon while chaos broke out upstairs. Finn wasn't in the mood for talking and sent the guy to the afterlife with a kick, already starting to worry about what was happening on the surface. Back to Will, the new monster was out for blood and sliced an entire building in half. Will barely managed to escape and realized that this creature was way more overpowered than the Grand Duke. Claire recognized the beast right away, a Devender, an elite monster from the 40th floor, famous for being a magic killer. Marcy revealed that capturing that thing alive had cost the lives of 50 soldiers, but now things were really about to get wild. Will saw how bad things were getting and thought about retreating, but when he noticed the monster was about to attack other students, he threw himself in front to stop the worst from happening. Even though the other mages called him useless, he just shouted for everyone to run away. Devender landed a kick that sent Will flying and, moving at an insane speed, slammed him into the ground to finish the job. Luckily, Donan showed up to save him and told Will to take a break because now the dwarves were going to handle the mess. Iris ordered everyone who could still fight to cover Will because Devender had just become priority number 1. But then something bizarre happened. The bodies of the defeated monsters started to emit a strange smoke, which was all absorbed by Devender. Edward caught on to what was happening and ordered them to collect the magical remains, but the five-headed one warned that it was already too late. Devender absorbed everything, getting bigger and stronger by the second. Donan tried to stop the evolution, but Marcy blocked him, wanting everyone to witness the birth of a real monster. After absorbing everything, Devender evolved and in the blink of an eye wiped several dwarves off the map. Marcy burst out laughing, saying that against that thing, neither magic nor brute force would do any good. Will finally understood the dirty trick. The attack on the city and the ceremony was just an excuse to create the perfect weapon against the Magia Vendor. Desperate, Will realized he needed to use that power again. Without thinking twice, Rost ran to activate the magic on Will's sword, but the monster was faster and cut Rost's arm off. Blinded by rage, Will charged at the creature, taking the fight somewhere else. Rost asked Kiki to go help Colette, while he stayed behind to protect his master, feeling like his fate was already sealed. Will felt powerless. Even with all his anger, he couldn't win. In the middle of a smoke from the fight, he was shocked to see that Rost had sacrificed himself for him. Before disappearing, Rost said he would always be by his side and then disintegrated.
Will remembered everything they'd been through together and, consumed by hatred and pain, completely gave himself over to the darkness.
Luckily, Warner saves him at the last second, and the two of them take off from there, along with Will, who's completely in shock after seeing Rost exit the scene. Meanwhile, back at the tower, Seiyan is fuming. He decides to come down because he can't stand seeing so many people losing their lives anymore. Even though he thinks the low-level mages are just a bunch of flies, he can't just sit there watching the massacre. But Kario stops in. He reminds Seiyan that he can't leave, because if a Magia vendor is defeated, the Great Barrier's done for. And if that happens, the invaders from the sky will turn the whole world to ashes. To make things worse, they're not in the best shape and need to recover their magical power. Kario gives him a lecture about what it means to carry that title and tells him to sit back down. But Seiyan doesn't care and says it seems like they only give that title to cowards. When he tries to leave, Kario shoots a fire arrow and warns him, "Either you sit down willingly or I'll make you." Things get heated between the two, and Eleanor's assistant rushes to cover her boss with a cloak, asking them not to get any dirt on the lady. Eleanor decides the best move is just to wait, since that city doesn't belong to the elves. But then Philvis reminds her there's an elf caught up in the mess, and Eleanor, already annoyed, tells her to go fetch the guy right now. On the other side, you can feel the tension. Afaria stands up, goes over to Aaron, and tells him to cancel the orders because they're just wasting time. When Aaron stands his ground and says he won't change his mind, Faria loses it. She freezes the whole place and makes it clear she's not going to abandon the one she loves. She warns that she's going to save Will, and if Aaron gets in her way, she'll freeze his insides too. Meanwhile, Warner is over there thinking that Will is their only hope now, but the kid is completely wrecked. Will keeps blaming himself, saying that because he doesn't have magic, he couldn't protect Rost or anyone else. He feels useless, just like everyone always said, and he cries, not understanding why he's the only one who can't cast a spell. Warner tries to calm the guy down, but the peace doesn't last long, because Marcy shows up out of nowhere, determined to take Will out, since he thinks Will is way more dangerous than the dwarves. And in the middle of the chaos, the rest of the group keeps fighting hard. Colette, right after protecting Whitney, hears a massive explosion. Kiki shows up right after, looking totally devastated, and Colette immediately realizes that Will was caught up in the blast. Without thinking twice, she grabs Kiki and runs, asking her to show the way. Sen overhears the conversation and goes along, telling Julius to hold down the fort there. To make things worse for him, Inal and Liana also start pressuring Julius to create the clones, and he gets furious about being treated like the group's errand boy. Meanwhile, the headless guy is orchestrating the destruction and orders Olvander to head straight to the academy. Sarah even tries to stop him, but it doesn't even faze the guy. Seeing chaos take over, Edward makes an extreme decision. He orders the dwarves to get ready for a suicide attack in the central square to destroy Olvander's mage killer no matter what. Gina gets furious and asks who he thinks he is to send the group to their doom, reminding him that Donan and the others have already fallen, acting as shields. Edward confirms everything, saying they need to protect the capital and the children no matter what it takes. Suddenly, a Dinosaurus charges straight at Gina, but Edward jumps in front and takes the hit for her. After taking down the monster, Gina, totally confused, asks why he did that. Edward explains that the enemy is now immune to magic, which means his life is worth less than hers, and he's willing to pay the same price so they can fight for their own. Shaken and annoyed, Gina gets up and calls the dwarfs to head to the central square. Colette keeps desperately searching for Will, but runs right into a Dinosaurus armed with a Mage Slayer, which makes her magic completely useless. She even tries to go for something stronger, but her bracelet starts reacting at the worst possible moment, distracting her. Sheila, panicking at the danger, attacks with everything she's got. The overall situation's bleak. The mages are falling one by one, and Mike tells the civilians to all run south together. Those mages Will saved earlier are there, facing danger head on. One of them wants to get out of there, but his partner says there's no way to escape. Jula tells them to stop trying to be heroes, because they almost got sent to the afterlife. Luckily, Elisa shows up, tells them that evacuating the wounded isn't the same as running away, and orders them to leave while she holds off the monsters by herself. The city is in ruins, and with the end near, people can only cry for their loved ones. Iris even thinks the dwarves helped lessen the danger, But no one has been able to stop Alvander. All the defensive lines are fallen, everyone's strength is gone, and the dwarves who are left can't handle this monster. She wonders what else they could do when suddenly she starts hearing something on the magic radio and wants to know what's going on. That's when Finn shows up right in front of her and asks the million-dollar question, "Where's the sword?" Back in the action, Marcy admits that the opponent is tough as nails because even in that critical situation, he tried to land a killing blow. But he insists that he hit him dead on. Will wakes up a bit confused, asking where they are. And Warner, in the middle of the smoke, says they've reached the west outskirts of the city. The problem is, when the dust settles, Will sees that Warner has a huge hole in his chest. Even gravely wounded, Warner smiles, happy that he managed to protect the boy. He apologizes to Will and says that now the city can only depend on him, believing that the boy will save Rue Garden. Will goes into denial. He feels frustrated because he couldn't protect Rost or Warner or anyone who matters to him. He cries, saying that a sword will never change the world and that a guy without magic can't do anything. Then Warner musters his last bit of strength, hugs Will, and tells him the truth. He had been lying this whole time. Will actually can use magic. He has a single spell capable of lighting the flame of hope in everyone around him. But before he can finish explaining, Warner loses consciousness and collapses. Will gets desperate, begging his friend not to leave him alone and asking how to use that spell. At that exact moment, Finn shows up and gives him a reality check to calm the boy down. Warner will survive and start breathing again as soon as his pulse comes back. Will is surprised, but Finn tells him the focus now is on Will, telling him to get up because everything's already set up. Will asks how the hell he's supposed to do magic, thinking he was about to start shooting fire from his hands. Finn tells him to stop being naive, explaining that Warner was talking about willpower, a kind of self-confidence to hold your head up and take action. Will complains that this childish trick isn't going to help at all, but Finn gets serious and tells him to stop talking nonsense. Real change in the world starts when we change ourselves. He reminds Will of his roots, hands the sword back to him, and says the lock is open. Just a drop of blood is enough for the sword to gain incredible power. He tells Will that he already knows the answer and that it's time to shout out the spell that's inside him. Will recalls everything he experienced at the academy, grips the sword tightly, and shouts, "Limitless Valor!" His hair changes color instantly. And you already know, right? In every anime where the main character's hair turns white, it means some massive power is about to show up. In a matter of seconds, Will starts clearing out the city, taking down all the monsters and leaving a white trail wherever he goes. He wipes out the threat with ridiculous ease, leaving everyone stunned, unable to believe that was really Will. Up ahead, Scion keeps protecting Colette. And even though she tells him to run away because it's too dangerous, he stands his ground. He says Will would never do that the coward has more courage than all of them put together, and that he's not going to be left behind. Will comes flying in at full speed and thinks Scion is mistaken. Actually, Will had always been jealous, but he also admired his friends. He spent his whole life chasing after the shadow of a magic wand. But now it's time to forge his own path and become a true arcane sword, destroying the monster's weapon and protecting Sion. On the other hand, Finn remembers the moment he met the great Mercedes. She was holding Will in her hands. She mentioned that they had bought some time, at least until the celestial invaders destroyed everything. It was enough time for her to create many wands and for him to forge a single sword. It was a contract that Finn proposed. He wanted to create someone capable of wielding the great fifth element. That's the key to tuning the world. The two of them understand something important. To save the world, the wand and the sword need to come together again in the present. As Finn looks at Will, he asks himself, is this the beginning of the opera he always wanted with Mercedes, or the start of a great tragedy? It's time to show the result of this contract with the Mage Queen. Euphoria, in turn, looks on in awe at Will's power. He pushes the monster back and leaves everyone stunned. Who wouldn't wonder what happened to him? Will goes after the enemy and takes care of business in a second. On the other hand, the principal tries to hold Deander back with all her strength. The teacher next to her says it's time to get out of there, but she tells him to wait. At that moment, Will enters the academy. The principal's startled when she sees him. The boy moves forward with a ton of confidence. He goes all out against Deander, and the two forces collide head-on. The whole city shakes from the impact's boom. Feel the tension in the air? Whitnell and Lyanna wonder if it's Will fighting. They don't waste any time and head straight there. Julius goes along too, because he doesn't want to be left alone. Edward can't even believe that's Will over there. Several students start running toward him. Meanwhile, up in the tower, the Maja vendor can't believe what they're seeing in the crystal ball. Euphoria blushes when she sees how strong her boy is. Colette stands up. Watching Will's fight, she can't understand how he's able to go toe-to-toe with Deander now. Before, he didn't stand a chance against the monster. She notices Edward and asks what's going on. She wants to know who that boy is. Edward breathes a sigh of relief, seeing his friend is okay. But he can't answer who the boy is. He's really frustrated. After all, he failed the boy. And now it's Will who's saving everyone's skin. A group of students approaches the academy. When Emma sees Will fighting, she thinks she needs to help, but a friend Paul holds her back. He reminds her that Thing is immune to magic. If they accidentally hit Will, things will get a lot worse. Everyone agrees with Paul. Besides that, they remember all the times they called Will useless. For years, they laughed right in his face. How could they possibly have the nerve to step in and help now? But one of them speaks up. Despite everything, Will saved everyone before, and now he's fighting for everyone again. They know it'd be super hypocritical, but even so, they still wish they could do something. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Sean shows up. He shouts to Will that he can do it. He yells with all his might. He's sure that Will is gonna end this. Man, even I got emotional here. When Colette, Liana, Whitnell, and the rest see him cheering, everyone joins in. They start rooting for Will. Even Sean and Julius's assistants join in the cheering. All the students are wholeheartedly supporting Will. Edward comments that he can't leave this in the hands of someone who doesn't use magic, but he doesn't have any strength left. Then Colette says he's being overprotective. It's time to trust the students and not just protect them. All of Regarden comes together to cheer for Will. Iris watches the scene and realizes something incredible. In a world focused on magic, everyone is cheering for a boy with no powers. And while Will faces Deander, he's deep in thought. He always felt bad, always got left out. All the people laughed at him. He even came to hate the world because of it, but deep down he just wanted to be accepted for who he was. And even if this is the only time people are cheering for him, those voices give him the strength he needs. He needs to protect the world and everyone in it. He goes all out against Deander, but unfortunately, his sword breaks in the middle of the action. Opharia senses something and looks down. Iris gets really worried. The steel of a sword couldn't withstand Will's incredible strength. Everyone gets tense. Will is unarmed and at a total disadvantage, but that's when Elfaria starts to act. Everyone remembers she's forbidden from leaving the tower. She makes up an excuse, saying she's just gonna take a look from the balcony. Outside, she creates a sword and lets it drop. She apologizes to the other Magivanders, saying it slipped out of her hand. The sword falls straight down to Will. He immediately feels Elfaria's power. He raises the hilt of his broken sword and absorbs his friend's magic. He forges a new sword, the Alvis Vina. Seeing that, Shun remembers the fight against the Grand Duke. It was exactly the same thing. But Julius doesn't get it. Why would he do that if the monster is immune to magic? The Dinder charges it well. The boy realizes the monster won't be able to withstand the attack. He hits the Dinder head on, dealing massive damage. Everyone is shocked. Edward immediately realizes that he used Vina. On the other side, Marcy is furious. He wonders what's going on. Why are they ruining his plans? Where did that kid come from? Zell just laughs, saying the boy is totally crazy. The other Magivanders get it right away. Will didn't use regular magic. He used the Great Fifth Element, the Key of Origins. Aaron realizes that Finn got what he wanted, the perfect union between the wand and the sword, the promise of the Mage Queen. Will keeps going after Deander. He dodges and freezes all the attacks. Colette is surprised to see Will using the power of Alvis Vina. Everyone is shocked. It's like Will is fighting back-to-back with Elfaria. Deander's reaching his limit. Marcy panics and orders an all-out attack. The headless monster opens several portals at once. Will's completely surrounded, but look at Elfaria. She's brimming with confidence. She says they can come at him with as many as they want because now, together with Will, they're unbeatable. Will drives his sword into the ground and charges up his power to the max. He activates Glass Frost, Elfaria's 7th spell. The attack creates a massive temple. It sweeps through all the monsters and instantly reduces everything to dust. Everyone there is in disbelief. Even Edward himself can't believe what he's seeing. The headless guy even drops his wand. Knowing no one can stop him, he decides to finish things off. He charges at Deander and slices the creature in half. Thanks to Elfaria's magic, he completely destroys the monster. The fight ends in a perfect visual spectacle. Paula Rigarden is amazed by the victory. The boy with no magic performed real miracles. Donovan and Gina are bursting with pride. Just like Werkner, though, I have no idea how he survived all of this. Finn celebrates super excited. Will has exceeded all expectations. At last, they found the world's last hope. He apologizes to the Great Mercedes for the delay, but says he kept his end of the deal and hopes she won't complain. After all, it was only 500 years of waiting. Now they can close the prologue and raise the curtains. It's the beginning of a story about a wand and a sword that are connected.
So we take a trip back in time, about 3 years ago. There was this incredible artificial rain falling, created by the mages, and everyone was amazed. Will was there, watching from a distance, and it hit him just how far away the tower was for him. It seemed like an impossible dream to get there, especially since he couldn't even control a single drop of water. He just wanted to be close to Elfie again and wondered if that would ever happen. That's when Ross shows up next to him, tells him to get out of the rain so he doesn't catch a cold, introduces himself, and says they're gonna be roommates and maybe even great friends. Back in the present, Headmistress Cauldron manages to heal Will and brings him back to normal. Finn quickly realizes that she mastered a really complex spell from Queen Mercedes, and that's why Will can still stay at the academy. He realizes that she needs to keep guiding and supporting the boy from now on. Will's memories fall perfectly into place, but Finn pays close attention and sees Will crying in his sleep, left wondering what's going through his mind in that moment of peace. The scene shifts to the Academy's infirmary. Professor Werkner opens his eyes and comes face to face with Colette and Edward, calling him stubborn. Edward gives him a serious scolding because he never takes care of his own injuries and hasn't changed at all since their school days. Leon explains that he passed out on the rooftop the night before and was brought there. She's all happy and tries to joke around, but Colette immediately shuts her down and tells her to behave. In the middle of all this commotion, Werkner remembers Will. Edward calms him down, telling him not to worry because the boy's being very well taken care of by Director Cauldron herself. Outside, the students are having a huge celebration because Professor Werkner got better and because they found out Will will be able to come back since he was the big hero of the battle. But Julius throws cold water on everyone's excitement. He calls everyone hypocrites and fakes, reminding them that just yesterday they were making fun of and humiliating Will for being weak, and now they're all sucking up to him just because they're interested in his strength. Elf and Ignal show up, tell Julius to stop being so stubborn, but agree that you can't deny the huge effort Will made to save everyone. Meanwhile, Sion just watches everything from the balcony, quiet and deep in thought. Over at the Vander Magic Tower, the atmosphere is heavy. The battle in Terminalia left 3,000 victims, and the leaders of the attack have simply vanished without a trace. Aaron orders everyone to investigate every corner, splitting the search among the factions, and immediately commands that the city's reconstruction begin at once. He questions why Will's officially out of the academy. Iris puts all the blame on Principal Cauldron, saying she hides things. Aaron realizes that the principal has been making too many decisions on her own, so he decides that from now on, Finn will be directly responsible for Will. The meeting of the mages remains tense. Aaron suspects that this attack is connected to that great war against the Destroyers, who almost wiped out the world of magic 10 years ago. The Fire Mage asks if any of those monsters could have survived. The Elf Mage, Eleanor, says that's impossible because her people fought to imprison all of them. But Zeus taunts her, reminding everyone that she ran away and hid in the forest back then. She completely loses it, attacks Zeus, and destroys a good part of the room. Iris rolls her eyes and mutters that this is why she hates going to these meetings. Aaron shouts, stops the fight, and tells everyone to focus on their work because tough times are coming. They notice Elfie is missing, but her assistant makes up a story that she has a stomachache, when in reality, she just wants to stay by the window watching Will. In a quieter corner, Colette and Leanna are talking. Colette brings flowers for Rost, saying it's the least she can do, even though he doesn't have an official grave. They talk about who Rost really was. He was a transfer student from the Western capital, super focused on becoming a good craftsman, and out of nowhere became Will's best friend. Colette admits that she felt a little jealous of that friendship, but that Will always considered Rost a very precious friend. The city starts being rebuilt at an impressive speed, thanks to the hard work of the dwarves. Iris runs into Finn and calls him by a nickname that really annoys him. She tells him to his face that she hates him and warns him to stay far away from Will. If Finn gets too involved, things are going to get out of control and no one will be able to stop the disaster. Finn understands that Iris just wants to protect Will because she likes him, but he's already made up his mind. He wants to keep the boy as his ally, no matter what it takes. We get another quick flashback.
Rost asks Will if he would feel bad if he suddenly disappeared, saying that goodbyes are hard. Will asks him to stop with that and says that he cares a lot about him. Rost thinks Will's gonna forget about him when he goes up the tower since the distance will be great, but the boy promises he'll take care of him and that distance doesn't matter. Will then wakes up with a start. He looks to the side and sees Rost's face, but the sadness quickly hits when he realizes it was just an illusion and the only one there was his pet cat. The big day graduation at the academy arrives. Even though it's a day of victory, the mood is still one of mourning because of the tragedy and the lives lost, including students and teachers. Director Cauldron gives an emotional speech in honor of those who fell, but she warns that they can't stay stuck in the past. The attack was just the beginning, and the new generation needs to move forward without losing hope. 250 students graduate, but the big question was who would get to climb the tower? To do that, they needed a lot of points and to create a brand new spell. 49 names are called and they receive the official hat. Will keeps his head down, really sad, realizing he didn't make it in. But then the table's turn. Director Cauldron takes the floor again and says that one student didn't meet the traditional requirements, but did something impossible to ignore. The magic he used saved lives, drove away fear, and protected the city. The magic of courage. And she calls Will up to the stage. The crowd's divided, but the principal demands respect. Xian is the first to start clapping, and soon everyone joins in, giving the boy a standing ovation. Edward is about to explode with anger, thinking it's absurd for them to have hope after everything that's happened. But Finn smiles, confident that they'll overcome anything with a strength like that leading the way. The ceremony comes to an end. The 50 chosen ones are ready to head to the tower. The principal gives one last warning that the journey will be full of tough obstacles. While the students celebrate, Elfie watches everything from above, her heart racing. Will, now wearing the official wizard's hat, breaks into a huge smile and says his dream has finally come true. He's gonna see Elfie again. That was the end of the episode. If you made it this far, comment part 6. I'll give a heart to everyone who comments so I know who the real fans of the channel are. Subscribe and turn on notifications because what's coming next is gonna blow your mind. And hey, don't leave without checking out this video that's popping up on your screen right now. The drama over there manages to be even worse than what you just saw. Without further ado, Rebobina is signing off. See you next time.